A big part of success depends on our ability to understand and manage our emotions. They can energize and keep us focused on what we want. They can drag us down into feelings of hopelessness. They can distract us to things that don't matter or might go wrong. Emotions can also drive us to say or do things that are harmful, getting us into even deeper trouble. In Learning Power, we teach students how to observe, name, and understand their emotions by using a simple color code for the primary attitudes we all have. Green represents feelings of happiness and confidence. Blue represents sadness and disappointment. Yellow stands for feeling afraid and anxious. Finally, red represents anger and frustration. Even though we commonly regard 3 of these primary attitudes as negative, it's important to help students understand that each attitude is part of a healthy emotional life. There are times when it is perfectly healthy and proper to feel sad, afraid, or angry, as these are normal responses to different life events. We want to teach younger students the benefit of having these negative emotions when the occasion calls for them, but also how to shift effectively into a more creative, confident, positive, and optimistic outlook. We are much more likely to be successful when we are happy with what we're doing and stay focused on our goal. Remember, green doesn't mean that we must always be cheerful and excited. It represents an attitude where we know what we want, how to get there, why it matters, and where to find the resources and support we need for success. Emotions are deeply involved in motivating behavior, and behavior, by which we mean doing something or taking action, is absolutely necessary for success in both school and life. Each of our 4 colors identifies a particular direction of behavior. When we're happy, or green, we tend to reach and move toward what we want. When we're sad, or blue, we tend to withdraw into isolation and keep to ourselves. When we're afraid, or yellow, we tend to avoid or run away from what we see as threatening. And when we're angry, or red, we tend to push against or try to knock down what's in our way. In our lesson on motivation, we want younger students to use these simple codes to invest themselves and stay focused on the goal of doing their best. Too often it is easy to get pulled off focus by disappointment over the time schoolwork takes from things they'd rather be doing, especially if the grade isn't worth it. Students also get pulled off focus by anxiety over the prospect of failure, that they won't be ready or able to succeed when the time comes. Another factor pulling students off focus is mounting frustration over the difficulty of homework and assessments. But we need to be clear. A reward that costs nothing, is risk-free, and requires no effort will be empty of value. Creative motivation is about managing these factors effectively, not making success easy. We can help younger students understand their motivational system by connecting what they want, which is called the reward, to what it will cost, called loss, to the probability of failure, called risk, and finally to the degree of difficulty success will involve, called effort. Helpful analogies with which most students will be familiar can be found in sports and games. These same 4 factors of motivation, the goal or reward, the cost or loss, the risk or probability of failure, and the work or required effort will be found in them all. This is where younger students can learn one of the most important truths of success. Whether it is good grades, personal achievement, material wealth, or celebrity fame, the real reward that all of us want is not the external goal, straight A's or millions of dollars in the bank, but rather the inner satisfaction we feel or expect to feel when we have reached our goal. Too many people expect success to make them happy when the causality actually flows in the opposite direction, from happiness to success. In other words, nothing outside us has the power to make us happy, but when we are happy, that is to say, focused on what we want, controlling for risk and loss, and keeping our effort as efficient as possible, we are much more likely to reach our goals and enjoy the inner satisfaction of success. Finally, we can talk about what might be called the calculus of motivation, ways that we can take the factors of cost, risk, and effort into consideration, but without letting them distract us from the reward we're after. For success in anything, we need to stay focused on what we want, the goal we are pursuing. When the cost or loss becomes significant, to the extent that we are having to give up more than the goal may be worth, we need to make a decision whether to continue or possibly change our strategy. Otherwise, our motivation for the reward will quickly drop away as we get fixated on the cost and sink into regret, sadness, and disappointment. When the risk of loss or failure becomes significant, to the extent that too much is at stake for the anticipated reward, we need to make a decision whether to continue or possibly change our strategy. Otherwise, our motivation for the reward will suddenly evaporate as we get fixated on the risk and overtaken by fear and anxiety. And when the effort or degree of difficulty becomes significant, to the extent that the pursuit of our goal is requiring too much work or is beyond our true ability, we need to make a decision whether to continue or possibly change our strategy. Otherwise, our motivation for the reward will be squashed as we get fixated on the labor and strain in the effort, becoming angry and frustrated. Notice how the color gradient of the words on the screen register these factors of cost, risk, and effort, while still leaning toward the green of what we want, the goal of our pursuit. In each case, we recognized the need to make a decision whether to continue or possibly change our strategy. That's what we mean by the calculus of motivation. Carefully weigh the negative factors against the positive value of what you want, but without getting pulled off focus and into disappointment, anxiety, or frustration. A change in strategy can help you control the cost, minimize the risk, and ensure that your effort is efficient and maximally effective. We don't want to ignore these other factors, but it can be disastrous if we get hooked and obsessed with them. So let's talk about some ways you can teach younger students about motivation. An obvious first step would be to connect this competency to the color cards and primary attitudes which the students should already know. Reinforce their knowledge by using the anchoring words for each of the 4 attitudes. Second, help younger students understand the 4 factors of our motivational system by using examples and illustrations from the realm of sports and games. Take any sport as an example and ask questions to help students identify each of the factors involved. Third, a fun small group activity could use the vocab wheel as a board game called vocab roulette. Have students throw a die to determine who goes first, which would be the highest number. The first player drops the die onto the vocab wheel and tries to recall the definition for the feeling word on which the die lands. You can decide whether you will allow reference to the list of definitions. If the player answers correctly or close enough, he or she can toss the die again, advancing clockwise around the wheel that many spaces. Can the student recall the definition of the new feeling word? If not, give others a chance to define the word, beginning with the next player clockwise. If no one can recall the definition, read it to the group and ask them to repeat the feeling word and its definition. Now, the player next in the circle can toss the die and advance to a new word. Get the idea? This game has no finish. Play for as long as you like, but keep track of how many correct responses each player gives. Afterwards, you can reflect with the small group about the 4 motivational factors in the vocab roulette game. What was the goal or reward? What risks were present? What did playing the game cost? As a hint, it took time to play, which could have been spent on something else. Finally, what effort or degree of difficulty did the game require?